Have you ever wondered where the modern concept of zombies came from? Picture this. The year is 1968, a time of social unrest, a time of change. Amidst this turbulence, a film emerges that sends shockwaves through the world of cinema. Night of the Living Dead. This wasn't just another horror flick. No, this was something different, something bone-chillingly unique. For the first time, audiences were introduced to the concept of flesh-eating zombies, creatures that once were human, now reduced to mindless, ravenous beasts. It was a chilling concept, one that struck a nerve and has remained a staple of the horror genre ever since. This film didn't just break the mold, it shattered it, redefining what horror could be and paving the way for countless imitators. But nothing could quite capture the raw, visceral terror that Night of the Living Dead instilled. Night of the Living Dead didn't just scare audiences, it changed the landscape of horror forever. The opening scene of Night of the Living Dead is a masterclass in building suspense. As our story unfolds, we find ourselves accompanying siblings Barbara and Johnny on a seemingly innocuous visit to their father's grave. But this is no ordinary visit. The tranquility of the cemetery belies the terror that's about to unfold. From the onset, the scene is laden with an eerie calm, a quiet before the storm, if you will. The siblings' casual banter and the somber setting of the graveyard create a false sense of security, making the audience let down their guard. And it's precisely this sense of normalcy that makes what follows all the more jarring. The suspense is built incrementally, subtly. A strange man in the distance, the growing unease in Barbara, Johnny's dismissive attitude, all these elements come together to create a simmering tension that keeps the audience on the edge of their seats. The sudden shock comes without warning. Johnny's playful taunts turn into a chilling prophecy as the strange man attacks. The sudden eruption of violence in the serene graveyard catches us off guard, sending our hearts racing. The fear, the panic, the helplessness, it's palpable, it's real, it's terrifying. The genius of this scene lies in its balance of suspense and sudden shock. It doesn't rely on cheap jump scares or gratuitous gore. Instead, it uses the fear of the unknown, the unexpected, to create a sense of dread and foreboding. The opening scene of Night of the Living Dead is not just a scene, it's an experience that immerses you in its world, makes you a part of its story, and leaves you with a lingering sense of unease that stays with you long after the scene ends. With its chilling opening scene, Night of the Living Dead sets the tone for a new kind of horror. It's a promise of the terror to come, a harbinger of the nightmares that await. And it's this promise, this foreboding, that makes Night of the Living Dead a true classic in the realm of horror. In Night of the Living Dead, what you don't see is often scarier than what you do. This statement, my dear friends, is a testament to the power of the unseen and the unknown, two elements that this film masterfully exploits to create a chilling atmosphere of suspense. Consider, for instance, the first night in the farmhouse. The characters have barricaded themselves in, and outside the world is dark and quiet. The only hint of the lurking threat comes from the occasional eerie sound, a distant moan, a rustle of leaves. The menace is out there somewhere, but we can't see it. We don't know how many there are, where they are, or when they'll strike. The unknown becomes a character in itself, a shadowy figure that looms in our minds, taking on a form more terrifying than anything that could be shown on screen. This is the genius of Night of the Living Dead. It doesn't rely on graphic visuals or jump scares to frighten us. Instead, it taps into our primal fear of the unknown, the unseen, the unheard. It forces us to confront the terrifying possibility that what we fear most may not be the monsters in the dark, but the darkness itself, the void of the unknown. In another key scene, the characters hear a news report about the escalating situation. The report is vague, the details sketchy. The authorities don't know what's happening, why it's happening, or how to stop it. This lack of information, this uncertainty, this unknown amplifies the fear. It makes us feel helpless, out of control. We're in the dark, both literally and metaphorically. And it's in this darkness, this unknown, that our imaginations run wild. We conjure up scenarios far more horrifying than anything the filmmakers could have shown us. We fill in the gaps, and in doing so, we become active participants in our own terror. By leaving much to the imagination, Night of the Living Dead amplifies the fear factor. It reminds us that sometimes the most horrifying monsters are the ones we can't see, the ones we create in our minds, in the darkness of the unknown. Night of the Living Dead shocked audiences with its realistic portrayal of violence. This was a film that dared to show the gritty, brutal truth of violence, and it did so in a way that was both shocking and deeply unsettling. The film's depiction of violence was not gratuitous or done for shock value alone. Rather, it was used as a tool to heighten the sense of horror and dread that permeates the entire film. Every act of violence served a purpose, contributing to the growing sense of unease and terror. One of the key scenes where the film's graphic nature is most evident is the basement sequence. This scene is a masterclass in tension and suspense, with the violence serving as a horrifying climax. The stark, unflinching portrayal of violence in this scene left audiences reeling, reinforcing the film's overarching themes of survival and the fragility of life. But it wasn't just the physical violence that shocked audiences. The emotional violence, the psychological torment inflicted on the characters, was just as horrifying. It was a relentless onslaught of fear and despair that left viewers on the edge of their seats, their hearts pounding in their chests. And yet, despite the graphic nature of the violence, there was a certain realism to it. Unlike many horror films of the time, Night of the Living Dead didn't shy away from showing the consequences of violence. Blood was not just a cheap special effect, but a stark reminder of the grim reality the characters were facing. This realism served to enhance the horror, making the film that much more terrifying. It was a stark departure from the more stylized, sanitized violence often seen in horror films of the time. It was raw, it was real, and it was utterly terrifying. In pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in terms of violence, Night of the Living Dead carved out a new path for the horror genre. It showed that horror could be more than just cheap thrills and jump scares. It could be a visceral, gut-wrenching examination of the human condition. With its unflinching realism, Night of the Living Dead pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable in horror. Night of the Living Dead didn't just create a new kind of horror, it left a legacy that lasts to this day. Its enduring influence has seeped into the very marrow of the horror genre, coloring the way we perceive and consume fear itself. The film's impact on the genre is profound and far-reaching. It spawned an entire subgenre of horror, the zombie film. It's hard to imagine a world without the shambling, flesh-eating undead, isn't it? They've become a staple of horror, from big-budget blockbusters to low-key indie flicks. And it's not just films. The world of television has also been touched by the cold hand of Night of the Living Dead. Series like The Walking Dead owe a great deal to this pioneering piece of cinema. Yet the legacy of Night of the Living Dead isn't confined to the undead. The film's themes of societal breakdown, fear of the other, and the terrifying unpredictability of human nature are still echoed in the horror films of today. It introduced a brand of horror that was raw, unflinching, and deeply rooted in our shared anxieties. Moreover, the techniques used in the film continue to be a cornerstone of modern horror. Its gritty realism, the slow build of tension, the sudden bursts of violence. These elements are now part and parcel of the genre. It's a testament to the film's enduring influence that these techniques, first seen over half a century ago, still have the power to make us jump out of our seats. So, whether it's the zombie apocalypse of 28 Days Later, the societal critique of Get Out, or the tense realism of A Quiet Place, traces of Night of the Living Dead can be found throughout the horror landscape. It's like a specter that refuses to be exorcised, a shadow that continues to loom over the genre. Over half a century later, Night of the Living Dead continues to shape the world of horror. So, why does Night of the Living Dead matter? I bet you're pondering this, aren't you? Let's take a step back and revisit what we've explored. This isn't just a film, it's a trailblazer, a pioneer in its own right. It dared to redefine the boundaries of horror, introducing us to a chilling blend of suspense and the fear of the unknown. Remember how we talked about its realistic depiction of violence? It was stark, it was raw, and it was unsettling. It made us squirm in our seats, but it also made us think. And that's the power of cinema, isn't it? Night of the Living Dead has left an indelible mark on the horror genre, inspiring countless films and filmmakers. Its legacy? Well, it's all around us. Every time we feel a chill run down our spine, every time we jump at a shadow, we're reminded of this cinematic masterpiece. Night of the Living Dead isn't just a horror film. It's a piece of cinema history that continues to haunt us to this day.